To Watercolor Waves, exploring the wet-on-wet watercolor technique. I am Serena Rios McCrae, watercolorist and digital artist based in Tucson, Arizona. I am passionate about teaching watercolor because of the healing and cathartic nature of the medium. Watercolor, when explored with creative freedom, is relaxing and beneficial for the mind, body, and spirit. In this lesson, I will share some essential watercolor techniques with you and encourage you to enjoy watercoloring with freedom and mindfulness. Before we get started, let's talk about watercolor supplies. So the first thing that you're going to need is your watercolor paper. Simple watercolor papers are readily available. My favorite is the Canson XL paper, which can be found at Michael's, craft stores, and on the internet. If you're beginning, you're going to want to start out with cold press watercolor paper. The next thing you're going to need is your watercolor palette. There are many different kinds, ranging in lots of prices, and I will give you a look into all the different styles in a minute. The third most important and essential item is your watercolor brush. My favorite type of brush and the most readily available is a simple round brush with a point. You're also going to need some type of towel or paper towel. I use a regular kitchen towel, which I can reuse and wash. You can also use a paper towel. If you use paper towel, you'll want it about 3 layers thick. And it comes with the name. You'll also need some water. I like to use 2 cups of water, and I'll explain to you why. Let's take a look at some types of watercolor palettes. So the most readily available watercolor is our typical Crayola or Rose Art palette, which we can find at any grocery store. There is also this craft grade watercolor palette, which can be found at craft stores and online. If you have tube watercolors, you can use a ceramic dish or a plate, and all you have to do is squeeze the paints out into little dollops, mix in water, and then you're ready to go. There are also travel palettes, which are absolutely fantastic. They come in these tins which fold out. You'll see that when you fold out the lids, they can also double as mixing palettes, which is really, really nice if you're on the go. These small limited colored palettes are one of my favorites. There are also options if you get more involved to buy an empty travel tin and you can fill it with your own pans of paint. This is one that I built myself with all of my favorite colors that I use the most often. And it also has the fold-out lids with the palettes for mixing your own colors. These travel palettes are really nice. They come with a ring you can slip your finger through if you want to hold your palette while you're working, so that you can hold on to it securely. When shopping for watercolor palettes, know that they do come in many different shapes, colors, and sizes. And what I am teaching you today works with any type of watercolor palette that you find. For this lesson, I will be using my favorite palette, which is the one that I built myself with all of my favorite colors. Now let's set up our watercolor space and get ready to paint. I have 2 mugs which I fill with water, and I place them on a washcloth to catch any drips as I'm working. I like to have 1 cup of water for clean water that I can bring to activate my paints, and I like to use another cup for rinsing my brush out. That way I can continue to paint and I have 1 clean and 1 for dirty, and I don't have to constantly be refreshing my water while I work. If you find yourself using dirty water, that dirty water is going to color your paints and cause them to be dirty as well. Before we begin watercoloring, it's very important to activate your paints. I like to use this little spray bottle just full of plain water, and I spritz my paints about 5 or 10 minutes before I begin painting. When you do this, the water will soak down into the dried paints and activate them. This will encourage the paints to come up easily into your brush when you begin painting, and you will get vibrant colors. If you are dipping your brush into a dry pan of paint, the colors are not going to lift in the same way, and they will be more dull. When you get started, you're first going to want to wet your brush. You need to have water in your brush to invite that color into the bristles. Now let's spend a minute to look at some brush technique. Using my round brush, I am placing it on the side of the bristles and dragging it across long ways to create a thick line. Now let's take a look at that from another angle. You can see that I'm holding the brush towards the paper, but placing the bristles down flat. Let's try that one together one more time. Place your bristles down flat and drag them across the page. Next, we'll be creating a slightly thinner line by holding the brush in a different way. We held the brush like this for a thick line. Now we're going to turn it the other direction, drag it along to make a thinner line. Let's take a look at this from another angle. We're still pressing the bristles down flat and dragging them across the page, but we are holding the brush a different way than we did before. This is how we held it for a thicker line, and this is how we'll hold it for a thinner line. Let's look at that from a different angle one more time. Now, as we are working with different colors through this experiment, I want to make a note to you to notice how thorough I am being in making sure that my brush is clean as I go from dark colors to lighter colors. Now I'm going to teach you how to make the thinnest line possible with this round brush, using the tip of the brush. To make thin, delicate lines, you're going to want to hold the brush pointing straight at the paper, and I like to use my hand to support the brush and make as light of a touch on that paper as possible. I showed you that very quickly, so let's go ahead and look at that again. You're going to want to brace the brush against your hand and use your hand to keep the brush as light as possible on the page. Here is a look at that angle closely one more time. Let's quickly review what we just learned. You're going to hold the brush flat against the page to make a thick line, turn the brush the other direction, flat against the page for a thinner line, and perpendicular to the page with the very tip of the point to make a thin line. Now that we've learned some basic line techniques, I want you to start having fun with your brush, creating some waves. Just have a little bit of fun on a scratch paper going up and down, around, and just getting comfortable creating wave shapes with your brush. Now for this exercise, we're going to tape down our page. So let me take a minute to teach you a little bit about tape. You can use masking tape, painter's tape, or washi tape. I find washi tape to have a softer adhesive and it's a little bit transparent, which makes it really nice for this purpose. So you're going to want to pull out your washi tape and measure the edges of your paper. This does not need to be exact. You just want the tape to go a little bit beyond the edges of the paper on both sides. I also like to look through the transparency of the tape and use the pattern to line up and make sure that I'm putting the tape on to create a straight edge. In this instance, I am looking through the white roses and making sure the edge of the paper goes through the center of each white rose. Finding washi tape that has words on it is my favorite for this reason. I also want to take a second to note, if you're nervous about the washi tape tearing your paper when it's time to remove it, you can tap your fingers on the adhesive to lessen it, or you can tap the tape on your clothing to lessen the adhesive as well. Now we're going to split our large paper into 4 parts. If you are working on smaller papers, you do not need to do this step. You can simply swap papers when you're done with one and move on to the next. Now it's time to get painting, so let's wet our brush. Remember, our brush does need to be wet to pick up that pigment. And I'm just going to create a fun little wave shape to start, right across the center of my paper. You can see that as my brush traveled across the page, there was more pigment at the beginning and it got lighter and lighter through my wave that I created. So what I did was I picked up some pigment and I just tapped a little bit more into the wet area. Now I've chosen a different color and I used the technique that I taught you to make a thinner line and butted it up against the first wave that I made. You'll notice as you start to play with tapping these colors together and creating these waves on top of each other, that whenever you touch a fresh color to a color that you've already put down, if they touch together, they will blend. That is the wet and wet technique, which is one of the most fun things to explore in watercolor. Let me explain this a little bit further. You can see in the waves that I have already created that some of the colors have a plain white line between them, and also that some of the waves touch each other completely, and you don't see that plain white line between them. The trick to understanding wet and wet and what is happening with these white lines and with the blending is that the white lines and the dry spots on the page create a boundary for where the watercolor will travel. Watercolor pigments will only go as far on the page as where it is wet, and it will not travel anywhere where it is dry unless you take it there with your brush. So you can see that as I'm creating these waves, some places I am deliberately leaving dry paper between the waves and the colors, and that is keeping them within the boundary so that they don't touch and they do not blend. And you can see that in other places with the waves, I am deliberately touching the colors together so that the colors will travel into each other, bleed together, and create some beautiful blooms. Now let's play with this technique again together. I'm going to create a simple wave, smashing my brush right into that paper for a nice thick line. I am adding in a little bit of extra pigment to make that pink a little more vibrant. Now we'll get a new fresh color, making sure to clean off our brush in between. And I'm going to use the tip of my brush to create my second wave. Now you can see those blooms that immediately blend in as soon as we break those boundaries. Now let's bring in a third color and see how those colors blend together. Tapping in a little bit of extra pigment. Anytime you make a wave and your pigment thins out as you go, if it becomes a little too light for you, all you have to do is pick up some more pigment from your paint pan and tap it in to your painting wherever you want it to be brighter. Now as we continue on, we will work our way across the page, exploring boundaries, leaving those white spaces, and mixing colors and seeing how they blend together. Also remember to have fun with the thickness or thinness of your brush strokes and your waves, and remembering to loosen up that wrist and create some fun shapes. Now I am going to put on some music for you while we paint together. And remember to create at your own pace. You can paint along with me. You can even copy what I am doing if you would like, or you can get as creative as you want. You can pause the video, fast forward, rewind, whatever it is that you'd like to do on your creative journey with me today. As we move into this last painting together, there's a few extra things that I want to teach you. With this first stroke, I am actually going to play with the full shape of the wave. Now I am going in with a clean brush and breaking the boundary with just water to invite that color to bleed out on its own. This technique is called pulling because you are pulling the pigment across the page by breaking the boundary and inviting it to come into a wet area. As we continue on our last section of this watercolor waves lesson, I want to talk a little bit about color. There is a chance that you are working with a watercolor palette that is more limited than the one that I have on hand, and that is absolutely okay. What you can do is you can explore mixing colors. Try mixing your purple in with your pink to make it darker, or mixing your blue in with your green to make it darker. You can mix colors like purple and yellow together to create brown. So if you are working with a limited colors and a limited color palette, take some time to mix your colors together, perhaps even in the lid that came with your palette, and see what kind of fun colors you can create on your own. Completed your watercolor waves. Now is for the very fun part, removing the tape. You can see on my examples that I have lots of water pulled up on the edges of my paper, and I definitely don't want to remove my tape while those puddles of water are there. You definitely do not need to sit and wait for them to dry. You can simply use a paper towel, fold it up so you have a little corner, and just dab away at those puddles that are at the edge of your paper. And now we get to remove the tape. You want to remove your tape slowly and carefully, this is where you get to enjoy the unveiling of your hard work. Removing that busy tape allows you to see your artwork framed perfectly for the first time. Congratulations, you have completed Watercolor Waves Exploration of the Wet and Wet Watercolor Technique. Understanding the wet on wet technique will empower your artistic practice.